The fog off Mahone Bay was thick enough to chew the morning. Renee came back, and she was standing at the end of my dock with a green tackle box held against her chest, like it might come apart if she loosened her grip. I knew before she said a word that she'd driven the whole coast road with her hands at 10 and 2, that she'd pulled over at least once near the causeway and sat there with the wipers going, and that she'd almost turned the car around. I knew because I'd seen that exact face on someone else. Dom used to get it right before he did something that scared the sense out of him. My name is Isaac. I was 31 that year, and I built and repaired boats for a living at a yard on the south shore of Nova Scotia, the kind of place that smells like epoxy and cedar and the low tide. I was good at my work. I could take a hull that a man had given up on and coax it back into something that would carry his grandkids. What I was not good at, what I had never once been good at, was tending to my own life. My apartment above the chandlery had a leak in the ceiling I'd been meaning to fix for 2 years. There's a joke in there somewhere about a boat builder who lets his own roof rot, and Dom would have made it. Dom made every joke there was to make about me, usually twice. He'd been gone 13 months by then. I want to tell this right, so I have to go back further than the dock. Dom and I met when we were 9, at the arena in town, both of us the worst players on a house league hockey team that lost every single game that season. He was the loud one. I was the one who apologized to the other team. His father coached badly and with great enthusiasm, and after the games he'd take the whole bench to the Tim Hortons on the highway and buy us Timbits until we were sick. Dom decided that first winter that we were brothers. And once Dom decided a thing, that was the end of the discussion. He was the best man at nothing I ever did, because I never did anything, and I was the best man at his wedding, because he did everything. He married Renee when we were 24. I remember the exact weight of the ring in my jacket pocket during the ceremony, because I was the one holding it, and I remember thinking that if there was a merciful God in the universe, he would let me get through this without my face giving anything away. Because I had already made the mistake by then of noticing her. Not in a dramatic way, nothing you could put in a letter. I'd noticed that Renee laughed at the parts of a story most people missed. I'd noticed that she was kind to people who couldn't do anything for her. The way she'd stand in the cold parking lot of the grocery store talking to old Mr. Comeau about his tomatoes for 20 minutes because he had nobody else to talk to. I'd noticed that when she was thinking hard, she pressed the pad of her thumb against the inside of her wrist, right where you'd take a pulse. So at the wedding, I did what a decent man does with a thing like that. I took it, and I built a little cupboard for it somewhere behind my ribs, and I shut the door, and I threw myself into a toast that made Dom's mother, Louise, cry into her napkin, and I danced with Renee once, because you have to dance with the bride. And I spent the entire song telling her that Dom had the rhythm of a man falling downstairs, so I wouldn't have to think about how her hand fit against mine like it had been measured for it. Then years went by the way they do. Dom and Renee had Oliver, and then they had Ren, and I became Uncle Isaac. I built Oliver a wooden sword when he was 3, and a whole toy dinghy he could actually float in the bathtub when he was 6. I made Ren a step stool for the kitchen so she could reach the counter, and she named it, because that's the sort of kid Ren was. Everything got a name. Sunday dinners at their place out on the point, me showing up with a cordless drill whenever the deck rail wobbled, or the storm door came off its hinges. I was the one Dom phoned when the sump pump quit in the middle of a March thaw, and I was the one Renee texted when she needed the crib moved, and Dom had, in his words, assessed the situation and decided it required a professional, which meant me. Dom died on a Tuesday in October. It wasn't the causeway or the ice or anything I could have fixed with better luck. His heart just stopped. He was 32, out in his own driveway, and by the time the ambulance came from town, it was already over. Here is the part I'm not proud of. After the funeral, I stayed close. Too close, if I'm honest. I told myself I was being useful. I re-shingled the shed. I changed the oil in the minivan. I took Oliver out on the water when the boys stopped talking, just the two of us and the engine and the gulls, until one afternoon he cried so hard he couldn't breathe. And then, having got it out, asked me if we could stop for chips. I built Ren a whole shelf of little houses for her stuffed animals because she'd told me, very seriously, that they were between homes. I was there. And then, sometime around the 6-month mark, I started pulling back. Not because I stopped caring, because I cared in a way that felt like theft. Grief does something strange to a house. It makes ordinary kindness feel loaded. Every mug of tea I carried to the counter, every time I made Ren laugh, every time Renee and I ended up talking too long in the doorway while the kids slept, I'd feel the cupboard door behind my ribs straining at its hinges, and I'd think of Dom in that driveway, and I'd hate myself. So I did what cowards call being respectful. I answered when she called. I fixed what she asked me to fix. I sent birthday cards, and I kept a careful, measured distance from the woman who, God help me, I had loved quietly for 8 years. She stopped calling around month 9. I told myself that was healthy, that she was moving forward, that some other man would come along who hadn't stood at Dom's grave with his fists clenched, and that this was correct and good. And now it was month 13, and she was standing on my dock in the fog with a green tackle box, and the tide was coming in around the pilings, and she looked at me like she'd rehearsed this. Renee, I said. Her chin did something, a small betrayal, and then she got hold of it. Hi, Isaac. I came down the dock too fast. You're soaked. Come in. Come up the kettles. I'm fine. You're standing in the Atlantic. That earned me the smallest laugh, the real kind, bruised at the edges. You always did think being cold was a character flaw, she said. It is. I've filed the paperwork. She looked past me at the yard, at the half-finished sailboat on its cradle under the tarp, at the mug of cold coffee I'd left on a sawhorse 3 hours ago. You still leave your coffee everywhere. Dom used to say you drank one sip and then just abandoned them around town, like a bear marking territory. That's slander, it's not. We stood there. The foghorn out at the point gave its low, patient note. And for 1 second, the whole thing dropped away, and we were just two people who'd known each other, half our lives, standing in weather. And then the second passed, and neither of us knew what to do with it. So she looked down at the box in her arms, and everything got heavy again. I need to tell you what he asked of me, she said. I brought her up to the apartment because the fog had beaten us both. I put the kettle on. I gave her a towel and one of my flannel shirts, and she pulled it on over her wet clothes, and I looked away while she did it, and I made the tea too strong the way I always do, and I set it in front of her and sat down in the chair across the little table, not beside her, because beside her felt like more than I had the right to. The tackle box sat between us. It was Dom's, I recognized it now. Army surplus green, a dent in the lid from the time he dropped it off the wharf and dove in after it fully clothed because his grandfather's lures were inside. He'd been so proud of that box. He kept it like other men keep a wallet. Renee put both hands flat on the table. About 1.5 years before he died, she said, Dom had an episode, his heart. He was out splitting wood, and it just went sideways on him. Racing, then skipping, then a kind of gray feeling. He drove himself to the hospital in Bridgewater and didn't tell me until it was over. He didn't tell me either, I said, and I heard the flatness in my own voice. He didn't tell anyone. They ran the tests. It was the same thing his father had, the same thing that took his father at 51, an arrhythmia, something structural. They wanted to put in a defibrillator, one of those implanted ones. He kept putting the appointment off. He said, she stopped. He said if he told you, you'd have every cardiologist between here and Halifax on speed dial, and then you'd lecture him about it in alphabetical order. I had to look at the window. The fog was pressed against it like a hand. I'd have started with anger, I said. That's not even the A's. She almost smiled. He knew what he had. He knew the odds. And instead of the surgery, or instead of the surgery only, he did this. She opened the tackle box. I don't know what I expected. Lures, maybe. Old fishing line. But the trays were folded back, and the whole bottom of the box was full of envelopes. Dozens of them. Some with the corners gone soft and gray, some crisp and new, and on the front of each one, in Dom's terrible left-handed scrawl, was a name and an occasion. Oliver, first day of high school. Ren, when some idiot breaks your heart. Renee, when you can't remember what my voice sounds like. My throat closed right up. He wrote a batch that first winter, Renee said. After the episode, when he thought he had a year, maybe less. And then when a year went by and he was still here, he'd add to them. He'd disappear out to the shed, and I thought he was fixing the snowblower. He was writing to his kids for birthdays he knew he wouldn't see. Her voice was very level, the way a voice gets when a person has already done all their crying about a thing and is just reporting it now. There's one for Oliver's wedding. There's one for Ren's high school graduation. There's one that just says Renee, When the loneliness gets bad in February, because he knew February would be the worst of it. And it was. I couldn't speak. Then she reached into the box and took out an envelope that had been sitting under the others, and she turned it so I could see, and there was my name. Isaac, 1 year on. When you're ready and not a day before. She set it on the table in front of me. I did not touch it. He made me promise something, she said. That I'd wait a full year. That I wouldn't come to you before that, no matter how bad it got, no matter how many times I picked up the phone. He said you'd need the year, he said. And here her composure cracked for the first time, just a hairline. He said you'd try to disappear. That you'd decide the most honorable thing was to vanish, so nobody had to feel awkward. And he said, don't let him. Give him the letter after a year, and then don't let him disappear. The kettle had gone quiet a while ago. Somewhere down in the harbor, a halyard was slapping a mast. I'm past the year, Renee said. It was 13 months yesterday. I sat in your parking lot for 40 minutes. She pushed the envelope an inch closer. I did what he asked. Whatever's in there is yours now. I looked at that envelope for a long time. His handwriting sat across it like a challenge. When you're ready and not a day before. Renee watched me, her thumb pressed hard against the inside of her wrist, and she looked like a woman waiting on a verdict. And it about broke me, because a year ago I had been the one who left, and she was the one who'd had to hold everything together. And here she was worried that she'd done something wrong by bringing me a letter my dead best friend had begged her to bring. Hey, I said. Her eyes came up. You didn't do anything wrong by coming here. Whatever's in this, whatever it does, you did the right thing. I wasn't sure, she said very quietly. You went so quiet on us. You just went. Oliver asked about you for months. Ren still tells people her step stool is broken, so somebody will call Uncle Isaac to come fix it. It isn't broken. She kicks a wedge under it and then reports it. That undid me more than the letters had. I'm sorry, I said. I thought staying away was the decent thing. It wasn't. It was just the easy version of decent. She wasn't being cruel. That was the worst of it. She said it gently, and it landed clean, the way the truest things do. I picked up the envelope. I slid my thumb under the flap, and I read what my best friend had written to me from the far side of a thing he knew was coming. I'm not going to tell you the whole letter. Some of it isn't mine to give away. But the shape of it was this. He started by insulting me, which is how I knew it was really him. 3 lines about my coffee habit and my roof and my monastic devotion to being alone, which was rich coming from a man who once cried at a beer commercial. Then he got to it. You've been in love with my wife since my wedding, he wrote. Don't bother denying it to a dead man. It's undignified. I knew before you did. I watched you dance with her and then not look at her for 4 years. I want to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it, because you're stubborn and you'll want to argue. I am not asking you to marry her. I'm not handing her to you like a set of tools in my will. She's not mine to hand to anybody. She's her own, and she'll decide her own life. What I'm asking is smaller and harder than that. I'm asking you not to run. When I'm gone, you're going to feel like every kind thing you do for her is stealing from me. It isn't. I'm dead, Isaac. You can't steal from a dead man. All you can do is leave the people I loved standing out in the cold to protect a feeling I don't even have anymore. If it never turns into anything, then be the uncle. Teach Oliver to bait a hook. Build Ren whatever she names next. But if it does turn into something, if love shows up someday wearing a face you already know, I need you to promise me you won't slam a door on it because you think that's what loyalty looks like. That's not loyalty. That's just fear with better manners. The most loyal thing you could ever do for me is keep the people I love from freezing at the edge of my grave for the rest of their lives. So, when you're ready, not a day before, Skipper? He always called me Skipper. I don't know why. I'm not even the one who owned a boat. I put the letter down and I found that I couldn't see the table properly. Renee had gone to the window and was giving me the mercy of her back. Down in the harbor, the fog was starting to lift, the way it does all at once on that coast, curtains drawing back off the water. You knew what it said, I managed. He read it to me before he sealed it, she said, without turning. The whole box, actually. He wanted me to know none of it was a trap. He didn't want me spending the rest of my life feeling ordered around by a ghost. She turned then. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. So I'm not here on his orders, Isaac. That's the thing I need you to understand. I did the waiting because he asked. But the driving over, and the sitting in the parking lot, and the deciding to come up those stairs. That was me. That part's mine. I didn't have a safe answer. There wasn't one. So I said the true thing, which was, I missed you. All year, I missed all three of you so much I couldn't stand to be near it. She let out a breath like she'd been holding it 13 months. Then stop standing near the exit, she said. You look ridiculous. We didn't fall into anything that day. I want to be clear about that, because it matters, and because the people who leave me messages about their own lives always want to know the timing. It wasn't a movie. She finished her tea. I walked her down to her car and the fog had gone, and the harbor was that hard, bright blue it gets after. And she said the kids were with her sister in Lunenburg and they thought she'd gone for groceries. Long drive for milk, I said, and she laughed. And it was the first easy thing between us in over a year. What happened after that happened slowly, board by board, the only way I know how to build anything that lasts. I started coming around again. Just being the uncle, at first, exactly like Dom had said, teaching Oliver to tie a proper clinch knot off the end of their dock, replacing the wedge under Wren's genuinely not broken step stool while she supervised with her arms crossed. Sunday dinners came back. Renee cooks the way she does everything, with total confidence and mixed results. Her butter tarts come out the size of hubcaps, and roughly the sweetness of maple syrup poured directly into your mouth, and she insists they're supposed to be like that, and I eat two every time and tell her they need a coroner. And she throws a tea towel at my head. That became our thing. It's a small thing. Small things are what a life is actually made of, I've come to believe. There was a recorder in the bottom of the tackle box too, under the letters. One of those little handheld ones, the kind you'd dictate a grocery list into. Dom had left one tape in it. Renee gave it to me a few weeks in, sitting on their porch after the kids were down, and she said she'd only listened to it once and couldn't do it a second time. I took it home. I sat in my truck in the yard for an hour before I could press play. It was just Dom talking. Rambling, mostly. He'd recorded it late one night. You could hear the woods dove ticking. He talked about Oliver's slap shot and about how Wren had told her preschool teacher that her dad worked in the sky now doing weather. He talked about being scared, which he never once did to my face while he was alive. And at the end, offhand, like it was nothing, he sang about 8 bars of that old Gordon Lightfoot song, the one about reading someone's mind, badly, off-key, laughing halfway through because he could never remember the second verse. Then the tape clicked off. I've listened to that recording more times than I'll admit. When I lose somebody now, and at my age you start to lose them, I put it on and let Dom sing his 8 terrible bars, and it helps. If you've got a tape like that of somebody, don't wait to be ready to hear it. There's no ready. There's just before and after is where the rest of your life happens. The trouble, when it came from Louise. Dom's mother had loved him with a ferocity that scared people, and she was grieving him the way you'd try to hold back the tide with a broom. She'd always been decent to me, and to Renee too, but grief had sharpened some of her edges. Renee told me about it over the phone one night, circling her mug with both hands the way she does, and she said, Louise called. I sat down, and somebody saw us. It's a small town, Isaac. The whole coast is a party line. She heard your truck was out at the point 3 Sundays running. A pause. She asked me if I was letting you replace him. The word replace went into me like a splinter you don't notice till it's deep. But it wasn't the word that got me. It was Renee's voice when she said it, the way it went thin and ashamed, and I couldn't stand that she was ashamed. I don't remember deciding to speak, only that I did. You're not replacing anybody, I said. Nobody's replacing Dom. He's not a part that broke off the boat. He's the whole reason the boat floats. Anybody who spends 5 minutes in your house can see that. She was quiet. Then she said, say it to Louise. So I did. Except it didn't happen on the phone, and it didn't happen quietly. Dom's parents host a dinner every year on his birthday, which is in the spring, the beginning of May, right when the coast finally decides to stop being brutal. That first spring after the box, Renee asked me to come, and I could tell it cost her something to ask because everyone would be there. Louise, Dom's father Gord, the aunts, the whole clan, and me, the uncle who'd disappeared and then hadn't, sitting at the table where they'd all be thinking about who wasn't. I almost didn't go. Old habits. I got as far as the truck with the keys in my hand, ready to send some coward's text about a job running late. And then I thought about the letter, about fear with better manners, and I put the truck in gear and drove out to the point. Dinner was fine at first, painful and fine. There was a photo of Dom on the sideboard and an empty chair that nobody sat in, and the aunts talked too loud to fill the room the way people do. And then, over the pie, Louise set down her fork and looked straight at me across the table and said, in front of everyone, "I need to ask you something, Isaac, and I want the truth." The room went still. Oliver, who was 8 and understood more than we gave him credit for, went very quiet. Ren, who was 5 and understood nothing, kept eating. "Are you moving in on my son's family?" Louise said, "before he's cold in the ground." Renee started to say something, and I put my hand over hers on the table, which I had never once done in front of Dom's mother, and I felt the whole room register it. "Louise," I said, "I'm going to tell you the truth, because you asked for it, and because I owe your son the truth more than I owe anybody comfort." My voice wasn't steady, but I kept going. Dom knew before he died that I loved Renee. He'd known for years. He wrote me a letter about it. He didn't ask me to court her, and he didn't hand her over. She's not a thing to hand over. What he asked was that I not disappear out of fear, that I not leave the people he loved standing in the cold to protect his memory, because his memory doesn't need protecting from love. It needs protecting from us pretending we're all made of stone. Gord had gone still in his chair. Louise's face was doing something complicated. He wasn't trying to replace himself, I said. He knew nobody could. He was trying to make sure the 3 people he loved most didn't spend the rest of their lives frozen at the edge of his grave. That's all. That was the whole ask. And do you love her? Louise's voice cracked right down the middle. Just say it plain, at my table in front of me. Do you? There were 100 careful answers, answers that would have bowed to the room and kept everybody comfortable. But Renee was sitting beside me with her thumb pressed white against her wrist, and she deserved more than careful. Yes, I said. I love her. Renee's free hand went to her mouth. I turned to her, and I stopped caring who was watching. I love you, I said, quieter now, just to her. Not because Dom wrote it in a letter. Not because we were both lonely and it was easy. I love you because you're stubborn and brave, and you talk to old men about their tomatoes in cold parking lots. Because your butter tarts should be illegal, and you die on the hill that they're intentional. Because when Ren was between homes, you built the whole idea of home for her out of nothing. Because when you look at me, I remember I'm still alive, and I spent a year forgetting that on purpose. She was crying now, and half laughing. You weren't supposed to say all that in front of your own funeral audience, she said. I can take it back and do a worse version. She laughed for real then, a wet, surprised laugh, and she leaned across the corner of that table and kissed me. Not a hidden kiss, not a guilty one. A kiss in front of Dom's mother and father, and the aunts, and the empty chair and the photo on the sideboard. And when she pulled back, she pressed her forehead to mine, and Ren, 5 years old, looked up from her pie and said, at maximum volume, "Does this mean Uncle Isaac lives here now?" And Oliver groaned and put his face in his hands, but he was smiling behind them. I saw it. Louise was crying hard by then. And after a long moment, she reached down into her purse, and she took out an envelope, and there was Dom's handwriting on the front, and it said, "Mum, when you're angry at somebody for loving them." He gave me this 2 years ago, she said, to no one, to all of us. He told me I'd know when to open it. Her hands were shaking. I think it's now. She didn't bless us that night, not out loud. But when I was leaving, she caught my arm at the door, and she held on, stiff at first and then hard. The way you grab something you're afraid of losing, and she said into my collar, "Don't hurt them. I won't. And don't you dare disappear on those kids again." I closed my eyes. Never. We built the rest of it slowly. I'm suspicious of anything built fast. It's the same in boats. By that summer, I had a toothbrush at the house, and a drawer in the dresser, and a standing appointment on Ren's Stuffed Animal Apology Committee, which is a real institution with real proceedings. Oliver and I fished the dock most Saturdays. Sometimes we talked about Dom. Sometimes we didn't say anything at all, just watched our lines, and both kinds of mourning felt honest. Louise came around by degrees, the way the coast comes around in spring, grudging, and then all at once. She started staying for dinner. She still cries sometimes when I accidentally do one of Dom's old bits, because I picked up his rhythms over 20 years, and I can't put them down. I've decided that's all right. I've decided that's just him, moving through the room. We didn't rush toward marrying either. I asked her the following spring, out at the point, down by the water, where the fog had first lifted off her that morning, she came back. I didn't get down on a knee straight off. First I said, I need you to know something. I'm not asking to take his place. She put her hand against my face. I know, she said. I'm asking you to take yours. We were married in September, down by the harbor, with string lights strung between the wharf posts and Dom's parents in the front row, and a small framed photo of him on the table by the flowers. Not hidden away, not a shadow at the edge of things. Right there, part of the story. The Reverend, who'd buried Dom 2 years before, married us with his voice going, and Oliver stood up as my best man, 11 now, dead serious in a borrowed tie, and Ren threw rose petals at us with such force it was more of an assault than a blessing. Somebody had left Dom's terrible 8 bars of Gordon Lightfoot playing off a speaker as people sat down, and I looked at Renee down the aisle, and I thought, you old schemer, you planned this from the shed, didn't you? During the vows, she squeezed my hands and whispered, no running. No running, I said, and no more slandering my coffee in front of witnesses. I make no promises. That night, after everyone had gone home and the kids were finally down, we sat on the back steps of the house at the point with the harbor going silver under the moon and the last of the fog coming in low over the water. Her head was on my shoulder. Dom's letter, mine, the one that started all of it, was folded soft in the pocket of my jacket where it lives now, worn to felt from all the reading. I thought about the boy who apologized to the other team, and the man who couldn't fix his own roof, and the year I spent standing near the exit of my own life because I'd confused running away with being good. I'd honored my best friend once, standing beside him in a church, holding a ring, and somehow, impossibly, I'd honored him a second time, not by protecting his grave, but by loving the people he'd left behind, not out of duty and not to pay off a debt, but as the exact life he'd begged us, in his terrible handwriting from the far side of everything, to please just keep on living. Renee laced her fingers through mine, in the dark, in the quiet, in the place where the fog had first pulled back off her face. He was right, you know, she had said. About what? That it would come back, wearing a face I already knew. I looked through the kitchen window at the warm light and the 2 pairs of small boots by the door, and the whole crooked, half-finished, going to last forever thing we were building, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, nothing in me felt unfinished at all.